No, mages did not need nerfing, and this is a very bad take that I feel needs direct addressing. So let's jump into this topic and discuss this. A lot of people have been saying with the PTR test that mages were overpowered, were breaking the game, and they desperately needed this nerf. And to that I say, have we been playing the same game since launch? Now, there are some very important things here that need to be addressed, and we'll get into them point by point in a second. First, there's a really good forum post about some of the balancing changes from a leader of a competitive company that's won 2 servers now and has even taken over Hades in less than a week. So I want to go through his feedback, and then I'm going to address some direct criticisms that I've seen and give my own thoughts and opinions on it, because there are a lot of bad opinions being put onto the forums, being put onto Reddit, and even my own comment section that I feel like need to be addressed, because people are confusing the difference between what's effective, what people use because it's fun, and scoreboard padding. So there's a lot of things happening here that needs to be cleared up, and people need to stop confusing these concepts. Let's talk about what Big Bear here has to say. So his introduction. The proposed balance changes on the PTR have missed the whole mark by a wide margin and put the game on track to be more imbalanced than it is currently. If implemented, these changes would reduce the variety of weapons used in both PvP and PvE, as well as reducing the impact that player skill has on combat outcomes. That already happened with 1. once we moved away from the preview system and they removed stagger, that skill went out the window. It just became about gear and perks. A higher skilled opponent will lose to a lower skilled opponent just because they have better perks, because most of the game is just now left click trading. The one with the bigger numbers wins. Anyway, where were we? Whilst the changes are so widespread and not catalogued completely yet, the direction of these proposed balance changes is already crystal clear, favouring simplistic and spammy melee gameplay at the expense of anything else, whilst the healing problem remains fundamentally imbalanced and left unaddressed. Now, I slightly disagree with that. I believe that a good CC spammer can now kill a healer. Before, a healer could go 1v6 quite confidently, and there are loads of clips around this. I've been putting a couple of them into my videos. But now, 2 DPS can beat a melee as long as one of you has a spear or a Warhammer. And I think that's a huge change. I think that's a really, really positive change. But, so let's see. How is balancing on live? There seems to be a misunderstanding that the game was already very imbalanced to begin with. Whilst this might be true for the healing mechanics and isolated abilities on certain weapons, Heavy Freeze on the Ice Gauntlet, and overall gameplay was balanced, if not favouring melee players to a reasonable degree given the comparably higher base damage melee weapons have, as well as the tracking and chase abilities. There's also to be added there that melee had way higher burst, because if you do, think of it this way, Fire Staff ability, say you can do 1,000 damage on like an ability will do maybe 1,500 damage or 100 or 1,300 damage, depending on the ability. You can do a light attack and then try to cast an ability on Fire Staff, but this is an instant, so you can very easily kite the light attack and then dodge the ability, or take the light attack and dodge. So you're looking at about 1,300 damage on an accessible ability. A melee weapon will not only do the same, where it will do 2 light attacks, so you've already done, say, 2 to 3,000 damage, because the base damage is much higher and the critical multiplier is higher. They can then follow up with an ability that will do another 2 to 3,000 on top of it. So some people will be like, oh yeah, the Fire Staff with double hit was doing 2k damage. Well, it's like, well, in the exact same time frame, a Great Axe is doing 6k damage with a Maelstrom or a Reap after 2 auto attacks. So the damage here, very different. The Great Axe vastly outperforming the Fire Staff there. Even the bow, some people are like, oh yeah, it can do 5k on a pen shot. I was like, yeah, but then what the hell does it do for the rest of the cooldown? It just dies. It's super squishy build. We have all seen the evidence of healing being overpowered. Yep, clips of healers being unkillable, even with 7+ players on them. Yep, I will link some of those below. Whilst competitive wars were mostly stacked with Great Axe Hammer players with a reasonable portion of healers and ranged players in Outpost Rush, ranged players had a bit more respite, and teams were more balanced. The bow being arguably too strong in small skirmishes, being able to one-shot a player with a 10k crit, that was possible. Not common, but some builds could do that. But the drawback was you would die in 2 hits yourself. And Hammer and Great Axe users taking advantage of the small confined outpost to corner and kill light and medium players. Yes, very easily. There was no escaping them. See, the main issue here is, yes, bows can do high single target DPS, but they have one ability and then that's on cooldown, and then they have nothing. Mages can do a lot of AoE DPS, but they're not actually killing anyone. Because since 1.01 or 1.02, get weird, mage AoE damage doesn't stack, meaning, yeah, you do a lot of spread out damage. Like, you could shoot, okay, say you shoot a fireball onto point, you hit 10 people, that's 10k damage. Wow, 10k on the scoreboard. You're only doing 1,000 damage to each person, and then that's immediately healed off by a single healer, meaning your damage looks good on the scoreboard, but you're not actually doing any damage. Whereas a Great Axe will run in and do 6k to everyone. 1k to everyone, or 6k to everyone. The reason the Great Axe seems so lower on the scoreboard is people he hits dies. That's the difference. Like, you can stand on war using Refreshing Pillar of Fire, constantly pump out 2k AoEs onto point, hitting 3 people for 2k. So that's 6k damage that you're getting on your scoreboard a second. Cool, 6k, 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 6k. It's all being immediately healed off because that can't break the life staff healing. The 2 healing circles beat it. It just beats it. By the time you've recast the ability, even with Refreshing Pillar of Fire, can't beat the healing. Whereas a Great Axe will actually directly burst a single person for 6k and then be able to follow up and do another 6k burst with Maelstrom. This, with 2 of them, can kill people, and it does break the healing. Not to mention that with there being no stack on CC abilities, you can infinitely stagger and infinitely sleep people, meaning they can't cast abilities to heal or even to dodge, meaning they die. So the difference is, you might think melee's doing less, but it's actually doing way more because they're just not scoreboard padding. Melee's getting the kills, winning the objective, taking the point, and that's it. So the numbers look lower. Whereas mages, they're pumping these huge numbers, but they're not adding anything. They're just being a nuisance, which is immediately being healed off. This is the big disconnect. People are like, oh yeah, my mage top in scoreboard, 2 million damage. Yeah. And then I'll be like, yeah, I did 500k damage, but I actually killed the entire point and captured all 3 points and then pushed the fort and we won. You just pumped some numbers. Like, you're not doing the same amount of work. So anyway, from these very clear balance issues, you would have expected there to be sizable nerf to healers. Yep, there are some, and I do think they're quite good. How good they are will have to be seen once we get into live. And some nerfs to the Great Axe and Hammer users to widen the diversity of weapons used in PvP. The musket needs to be changed entirely due to the hit scan nature. I'm okay with that. I actually think musket needs buffs. And weapons like the fire staff would have received fixes. Yes, there are some perks on the fire staff that doesn't. They nerfed abilities that don't work on the fire staff. What the hell is wrong with the developers? Which will have brought the damage in line with other ranged weapon damage. Yes, the fire staff needs buffs. The fire staff needs buffs. People are like, oh yeah, fire staff, it does 1k damage at range. Oh no, OP. I'm like, really? Like, I can charge with grip, close the distance, dodge one ability, and then with, like, say the player models are this big, yeah, left click. It's crazy how much distance you cover. I feel like people who complain about mages never played mage, and they've just been getting beaten by better players when they've just been on a brain dead left click build. Stop maining spear and telling me that mage is OP. Yeah, it's just not comparable. Like, yeah, you can do 1k at range, and you can't 2-hit that, and it takes a long time to do it. Yeah, with melee, you can do 4 hits instantly, followed by another 4 hits instantly, which does more damage per hit with a higher crit multiplier. So your burst DPS is much higher, and your sustain is much higher. You're just not spreading out the damage to pump that scoreboard. So, what has the PTR got wrong? With balance problems identified and considered, it is surprising to see the changes which run counter to almost all conventional thinking done by competitive New World communities. Yes, that's true. The balance changes seem to be based purely off Reddit screeching and nothing to do with actual competitive gameplay. Melee weapons. Great Axe, we have seen the Great Axe an extremely popular weapon due to its evident chase and CC abilities. Plus, it's the easiest weapon in the game to use. Receive almost no nerfs, but in fact small buffs. For example, it is not clear why the Great Axe needed root. Yes, they've added roots to 3 of its abilities. 3. Reap, Maelstrom, and Gravity now root, so you can't use exploits to jump out of gravity, which is good, but now Reap and Maelstrom also root. This left the Great Axe with still the best weapon in the game with high damage, CC, chase, and tracking. We are left with a big question mark as to why such meta-defining weapon has been left with a small buff while still a far less powerful weapons to receive nerfs. Yes, why is the only DPS, the only true DPS weapon in the game receiving buffs? Like, a Great Axe just beats every other weapon in the game. It just does. The Warhammer, another very popular weapon, and something that I've always said is very bad for 1v1s is the Warhammer. It's low damage, bad tracking, and it's good abilities. The problem with the hammer is when you have 10 people using it, that's when it becomes incredibly OP. Because one Path of Destiny, easy to dodge. One Shockwave, easy to dodge. 10 Path of Destinies will infinitely staglock you. 10 Shockwaves will infinitely sleep you whilst also doing damage, meaning you die. You just die, there's nothing you can do, you can't even use a potion. This is puzzling, as the Warhammer already has the highest base damage of any weapon in the game. I thought the Great Axe had higher, might be due to scaling, and has some very good stunning, rending toolkit, and no diminishing returns. Yes, whereas only one Ice Storm could damage you at any time. Just one. You can be infinitely stun-locked by hammer. If 50 people choose to Path of Destiny you, you're just going to go dead. There's nothing you can do about that. This is puzzling as Warhammer already had. Yep, and competitive wars are currently ping-pong of hammer stuns on points due to Hammer's toolkit. The hammer was fine beforehand, but these crowd control abilities receive even more damage in both. Yes, they've increased damage on stuff like Wrecking Ball, increased the armor pen, and some of the abilities. Why? Wars are currently 35 to 40 Great Axe and Hammers. And then you have 10 Life Staffs, or maybe more. A lot of them also using Great Axe or Hammers. So it's like, you've got 3 weapons in your wars. A good 80% of them are Great Axe and Warhammer. And, yeah, with maybe 10% to 12% being Life Staff. Why do you think you needed 4? Why would you buff these? Like, some people are like, oh yeah, my survey, speed, so good, high damage, everyone's amazing. No, they're pumping the scoreboard. They're useless and they're trolling. They're not effective. Spear, the core issue with Spear remains its long telegraphed abilities. Yep, although it is promising to see the weapon receive significant damage buffs, that is nice, because Spear tracking is atrocious, as this is one of the weakest weapons in the game currently. Yes, Spear is a PvE weapon. It's very good in PvE. It can apply multiple rends, but in PvP, you dodge the kick stun, and then you grit through everything and it just dies. Or if you're a mage, you just run away and you just range DPS them because it's so telegraphed and easy to avoid. It's just a bad PvP choice weapon. If you're using this weapon, you're a PvE. Sword, another good set of changes, as the sword was struggling to find niche in PvP. The increased damage values and reduced cooldown Sleep and Strike have given the sword a much needed boost in the right direction. I completely agree. However, the sword still feels like it lacks use in large scale PvP. Pretty much. The sword, mostly what you see it used is they hold right click, they stay alive for a while, and then they swap to a life staff and heal up, and then they go back to sword and shield. That's it. You see a heavy attack coming, you shield bash to get your stamina back. That's all it does. It's good at what it does, but that's all it does. Overall, these changes need to not go far enough sword, and it needs to receive. It needs more. I don't know what they could do. Damage isn't enough, because if you just high damage, then you're unkillable and you have high. But the hatchet is already a very good weapon. Yes, people who say this isn't a good weapon just don't understand the fundamentals of the game, and they're using it wrong. The hatchet has incredibly high burst damage. Feral Rush is one of the best abilities in the game because it's not only an interrupt, it's also a root, and if they're below 30% health, it pretty much just kills them. Like, if I see someone under 30% in war, I will quick swap to a hatchet, and I'll Feral Rush them in the back, and they'll take about 5k, and that burst, no one has 5k HP at 30% health. It just kills. If people are dumb enough to trade with you, Raging Torrent will absolutely demolish 5 people trying to solo you because of your Immortal unproc. You can easily out-trade people at the end there and just win. Abilities also proc abilities like Chain, so you can hit multiple people. And the 30% self buff, amazing. I also think that the abilities like Rending Throw, amazing. I also think the slow abilities on throwing out... what's the other one? Social distancing. That's also really good. 4 seconds slow to get in and hit with other weapons. It's a quick swap weapon. Use it for... It's like the hammer. Use it for one ability, then you swap off of it, and it's so good for those right moments. Overall, the hatchet seems to be in a very good place after these changes. Yeah, I like that they're buffing Rending Throw. It means it's going to be up more. You're going to use it more. Rapier. This is... It has 0 start frame parry with a 2.5 second stun and has received a buff. I'm actually okay with that because since they changed the way parry and riposte works in launch, now when they use riposte, you can actually attack into it and still dodge. So it's not, as long as you're looking for it and you know what you're fighting, it's actually really easy to counter. Damage is too low, as it cannot be avoided and reacted against. It can. You can literally hit it and then dodge the stun. 20 seconds was already a short cooldown, but to reduce this ability to 12 seconds, that's insane, because now you're more likely to get hit by it. Because, yeah, I'll look for the first riposte, and then I'll avoid that and kill them. But, yeah, if they've got one every 12 seconds, and with how good they are at running away, Rapier is going to be a nightmare to chase down, and I think that's hilarious. They're a very strong weapon, small-scale combat, and has a place in wars. I don't think it has a place in wars. I think you're trolling if you bring it. Although it suffers from a lack of AoE attacks, something which still hasn't been addressed. Yes, true. Ranged weapons. Now, let's talk about the section where AGS just hates people who use this playstyle. Firestaff, by far weapon to receive the heaviest nerfs, without question. The question is to why. This weapon has one of the lowest base damages values in any game, which was only compensated by the damage increase in passives. Yes, anyone who said that I was getting 2 shot by the Firestaff, then you were getting 1 shot by melee. Firestaff has the lowest base damage with one of the lowest crit multipliers, meaning that there is no way you would get 2 shot by a Firestaff and not get like 1 tapped by a great axe. You're just lying. You are lying to me. You're lying to the community. You're lying to anyone that's paying attention or listening. Like, you're full of rubbish. You're absolutely full of rubbish. So, as we were saying, which David content the episode, Firestaff had a nice niche in Wash and Outpost Rush because it was extremely vulnerable to melee users. Yes, the Life Staff added good AoE damage to, and it was a support DPS weapon. It supported melees. It couldn't solo kill anything, but it could help get more AoE spread, and it could put out some more damage. It could also, Incinerate could ignore tower shields, which is why it was good. Because people were saying, oh yeah, I use Burn Out to reposition. It's like, no, you're not. If you're trying to reposition and you think your primary DPS is a Firestaff, you are playing it wrong and you're trolling your team. You're meant to be using Fireballs to put out some AoE damage and some Area of Denial. You're meant to be putting out Incinerates to help your melee fight the melee fights and to break shields because it ignores them for damage, meaning if you run in and hit an Incinerate on a shield user, they lose half their health and they have to rethink about what they're doing. And use Pillar of Fire to help your melee by hitting multiple people fighting into your melee crowds because you're spreading out more damage, meaning it puts it in favor of your melee. You were never solo winning points. The people who thought this was, and when I was trying to explain this is why you don't use Burnout, they didn't get it. They just don't get it. They'll just dislike, won't even leave a comment. They don't understand the game. They're not worth it. The Firestaff was still doing far less damage than melee attacks and seems to be one of the few weapons which was somewhat balanced with melee, hence the inclusion of the Firestaff in competitive PvP rosters. Yes, because the Firestaff and Ice Gauntlet worked as good DPS support tools and they weren't primary DPS, which is why you would use about 5 to 10 of them since the AoE nerfs. Because before, when AoEs could stack, you would just put in like 40 of these guys and you just win. Now that they don't stack, you can't put in that many of them. So yeah, I think people weren't really thinking that through. So with Firestaff balance changes were to go through and they practically remove Firestaff from competitive PvP altogether. Yep, whilst doing absolutely nothing about how poorly performing Meteor Shower is. Yes, the AoE ability that everyone complains about was terrible. It was hot trash. Firestaff's damage is now too low. You're hard trolling. Like, I don't know what you'd use Firestaff for other than just being now less effective. They nerfed abilities that didn't even work. Nerfing this weapon makes no sense. It needed buffs. Like, I wouldn't care if they nerfed the damage as long as they made burn ticks do more. Because right now, a burn tick does 30 damage per tick, and you can stack 10 of these. So, but they don't all proc at once. One will proc at a time. So yeah, you do 30 damage, 30 damage, 30 damage. Like, most people have 10k health. They don't care about 30 damage. Now, if you made it so getting hit by 10 stacks of burn was a guaranteed death, I wouldn't care if this had low damage. It means I'm being rewarded for landing hits because you need to crit to get a burn tick. You need to land the ability to get a burn tick, such as Incinerate. You need to land left clicks to do it. If you kept these nerfs with low damage, but you made it so burn ticks, say, ticked for 200 per tick, and I had 10 stacks of that, meaning that you're going to take 2k damage over the time as long as I'm keeping these stacks up, that's fine. We see a place for Firestaff in the meta, but that's not what they did. That's not what they did at all. Ice Gauntlet. This weapon needed to be fixed rather than receive heavy nerfs. It has got... now the Ice Gauntlet appears to have suffered the same fate as Firestaff, being a weapon that has very low base damage that has been nerfed even further. Heavy Freeze root cooldown is a welcome change. Yes, I did think that just landing the Ice Shower and then instantly winning was a bit much. Although increasing the cooldown of Ice Shower and applying a heavy damage nerf to Ice Shower removes the use... Deadly Frost. Removes the use of Ice Gauntlet had as a weapon. Overall, the Ice Gauntlet now feels like it's a clunky and boring weapon to play with too little impact. Yes, so what they did with Ice Gauntlet, they nerfed Heavy Freeze. That's the one change it needed. They then lowered Ice Storm by 25%. They then lowered the usability of Entombed by making it have a mana cost, when this was your ability to recharge your mana and to escape getting cool in hard CC such as Gravity. They then lowered the cooldown on Ice Shower, which was your only way to fight melee opponents. The weakness that you had with Firestaff was melee. The weakness you had with Ice Gauntlet was ranged. Meant they paired well. They've now made it so Firestaff loses at range, and they've made it so Ice Gauntlet loses in melee. Both weapons have lost their niche. They're not. It's not worth using. They increased the cooldown on Ice Shower, so now you can't trade with a Great Axe. You can't win in melee against melee anymore. They lowered the crit damages. They lowered the abilities to get those crits. They've nerfed them out of the game, and people who are like, "Oh yeah, but on my company we topped all the leaderboards." Like, great, you did little damage to many people, and you weren't helped. GG. Now it's even less. It's even less, and it's such a bad change. It's such a bad... People who are trying to argue for this fundamentally don't understand the game. They're saying, "Oh yeah, topping the scoreboard means it's good. Everyone playing it means it's good." No, people play it because it's fun. Left clicking with Great Axe is boring. Being unkillable with Lifestaff for some people is fun, but not many people want to stand there with a very clearly overpowered weapon and be unkillable, which is why higher skill weapons like Firestaff, Ice Gauntlet, Musket, Bow, Spear, Rapier were more popular because they're more challenging to use. And when you every weapon should have a niche where it feels OP. Ice Gauntlet, if people don't avoid Ice Shower, because before you couldn't dodge Ice Shower, but now you can. If you got caught in it, that was a win on one person. Only one. And that felt good. That felt good. But they've taken that away. So now it has nothing. You can't... If you have two Ice Gauntlets, one of you doesn't do damage. Because your AoEs cancel each other out. You're getting hard trolled. Same with Firestaff. Very low damage at range, but it had a good ability to sustain damage. It could sustain DPS on an AoE level, which is why it was usable. Can't now. Both of them have lost their niche. Firestaff's terrible at range. Ice Gauntlet's terrible at melee. They're both just not usable weapons anymore. Void Gauntlet's going to add some utility, but yeah, you don't need to be a DPS main to have that utility because Lifestaff can do that. Because the Void Gauntlet can now half healing by 50% with an ability, and it can remove buffs. Your Lifestaff can do that. You don't need... Inbuilds have been harder. Musket hit scan weapons damage cannot be avoided. We saw the impact that increasing the musket had in Alpha 3. It completely broke the game. True. Currently, the musket damage is now unavoidable, easier to hit, and has more armor penetration. Has a longer range and has more burst potential than either Firestaff or Ice Gauntlet. Yep. It's unclear why, in addition to... okay, he's going on to say how OP it is. I actually think Musket's is fine to do that kind of damage. I actually think the damage is a little bit too low because it's just annoying. Like, you can heal it off quite quickly because it doesn't have high enough sustain. So I don't think... I think it still needs buffs. Lifestaff, you could write an essay on how proposed balance change of Lifestaff failed to address the core issues of healing being too strong. It is. We are seeing the exact same problems on live being replicated on PTR of healers being unkillable. 2 DPS can kill a healer. I'm fine with that. As long as one of them has CC, that's fine. Before, you could have 7 people attacking the healer, and 3 of them could be using CC, and the healer could still survive if they ever used the correct build. That was insane, and there are so many clips of it. And these people aren't even using the most optimum builds. They're just surviving because the healing is so high. With these changes, if one person knocks them down with a hammer and then other DPS are hitting them, they actually die now. Fine. I'm okay with that. I don't think you should always be able to 1v1 a healer, but there should be outplay potential. If you don't have outplay potential, why wouldn't you be? There are people who are saying that, oh, if I can't 1v10 as a healer, I'll go DPS. I didn't need you. It's you shouldn't be able to 1v10. That's not the point. You're meant to. A healer is a strategic resource that you should work to keep alive, so he can keep everyone else alive. That's it. A healer shouldn't be able to take an entire point solo now. It just shouldn't. Bow, whilst being one of the strongest weapons in the game for duels and Outpost Rush on live, it seems to have some issues that have gone undressed, and players are still getting 8 to 10k crits in one shot. So yes, these bastards are stealing the Baron in a one hit. Meanwhile, the nerfs to poison shots seem to miss the mark. Yes, the nerf to Rain of Arrows is stupid as well. Penetrating shot has been left untouched. Rain of Arrows radius nerf, yep. Penetrating shot needed a nerf. Everything else needed a buff. I don't know why they didn't go that way. I have no idea. Conclusion, just when combat looked like it was steadily moving in the right direction, the PTR changes have thrown a spanner in the works. While some of the balance changes for some weapons, spear and sword, are promising, many other changes have missed the mark. Hammer, fire, staff, great axe, ice gauntlet. Yep. Overall, these balance changes feel fundamentally misunderstand problems of combat and gameplay and PvP, and have widened the imbalances present in the game. Absolutely true. These basically, there are now 3 weapons in the game: great axe, hammer, life staff. That's it. That they're your 3 weapons. You might put a sword and shield on the life staff, and you might put a void gauntlet on the life staff, but that's it. The life staff is now your heal and utility weapon, as well as your tank weapon, whereas great axe and Warhammer are your CC and your DPS weapon. No other weapon has a real place in the game, and you're trolling using anything else in wars. Like I said, the main issue that people who say that mages needed these nerfs, they're confusing scoreboard pumping with what's actually being effective. There are balance issues, and then there's scoreboard topping. Just because you're topping the scoreboard doesn't mean you're actually doing the most work. The time to kill on a great axe is much lower than the time to kill on a fire staff or a knight. Much. Yes, I know that because of rubber banding, you avoid an ice gauntlet ability, then you get sucked back in, and suddenly you take 5k. That wasn't the ice gauntlet doing 5k damage. That was desync. You on your screen ran out of the ability, and then you got dragged back into it. What actually happened is the serve stopped working, you stood still, and then he dropped a ability on you, was shooting you, and then you reconnected to yourself, and then you took huge damage and died. That's not an issue of the weapon. That's a server-side issue. That's... Nerfing a weapon because the game doesn't work properly is a terrible idea. Fix the game. Because the thing is, Mage CC wasn't exactly that good because you couldn't stack it. Only one could be applied at a time. Whereas infinite Path of Destinies, infinite Wrecking Balls, infinite clear-outs, infinite shockwaves, which all apply rend whilst giving Fortify to yourself and your teams. That was the problem. Like, Warhammer wasn't good solo, but 10 Warhammers, 20 Warhammers, nothing you do. There's no counterplay. You're just constantly staggered and slept. And then if you're getting hit by artillery as well, you're going to die. It's the same that you can infinitely stack AoE damage on a Great Axe, which means the 2 Great Axes pushing the entire backline in a war would insta-kill everyone, because they each both go in. They each do 1k on a hit, 2k on the follow-up, and then another 3k on an ability. So together, that's 4, followed by 6, that's 10k. Most people don't have 10k health. You're dead. You're dead, and that's without crits. Dead. One of them crits, and you've wiped an entire backline. Entire backline goes down, entire frontline goes down, because you've now got no support DPS, you've got no CC, you've got no heals. Game over. And if the other team is also spamming Path of Destinies, you can't use potions. You just lose. Yeah, these balance changes are bad. I hope PTR doesn't go through, and I hope some of these topics I'm trying to explain here that people are actually going to listen to, because a lot of times I'll explain basic game mechanics, and then I'll have people who've never played the game competitively, don't duel, aren't included in wars, that aren't being put into wars, who are like, no, my spear, top DPS, fire staff. I died to a fire staff once because I don't know where my dodge button is. Don't listen to them. Like, these are some pretty big imbalances. And hopefully AGS take note and make some positive changes here. If you actually have a compelling argument why this is wrong, please reply below, because people don't make compelling arguments like, I disagree, didn't vote, just like... That's not an argument. You're just saying that you're wrong, but you don't like the right argument. Like, make your case is what I'd say. But anyway, that's it. That's all I've got. Yeah, I'm going to go have some cheese and wine. Bye, guys.